So now we're moving on to 2003, Clone Wars 2D. Does anybody remember this show?
Yeah.
These both follow the same place in the timeline, but 2D was actually pretty cool because it was created by, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Genndy Tartakovsky? Okay.
Yeah.
So he actually did Samurai Jack and Dexter's Lab, and you can see the animation similarities there.
Yeah, one of the things I love about this show was that it was the first one to really show us what Jedi could do at the height of their power. And I think there's no better example of this in this show than this clip from this episode. I mean, seriously, that's awesome stuff. I couldn't believe it when I saw that. I was like, why am I not seeing this in the movies?
Yeah.
These were actually 4-minute shorts that were being aired right after Attack of the Clones had come out, and they were supposed to bridge that gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith.
The clones in this show were pretty cool. They didn't really talk, but they kind of had this whole tactical thing that they did, which was really cool.
Yeah, they had their own sort of language.
This show did introduce new characters, just like the holiday special that appeared later. So they created General Grievous and Ventress, which appeared later in film and cartoons.
Yeah, and the other thing that this series tried to do was really butt you right up to the events of Revenge of the Sith. And so one of the things they did was they explained General Grievous's asthma by showing you that Mace Windu in a final battle with him crushes his lungs before he escapes, and so he begins to cough, and that's why. Well, that was why at the time he was coughing in Revenge of the Sith. However, this show has since been it's no longer canon, but you'll see why that is.
And neither is droids or Ewoks for that matter.
Right.
So.
But Mace Windu in this show is the standout Jedi. He is. I mean, it's unreal. I mean, I would love to just have this clip of him on loop all the time. And at the end of this episode that we showed you the clip from, there's a little boy who's watching from the hilltop. And when he sees the victory, Mace Windu's victory, Mace Windu jumps onto the hill, and the kid offers him a drink of water from his water bottle. And I couldn't help thinking that it's the Mean Joe Green commercial, Reborn. I was like, this must be a reference to the classic Coke commercial.
Yep. So now we're at Clone Wars, and this is set before Sith, and it was created by a different person, Dave Filoni, and so you can really tell the difference in tone and presentation. Whether you like one or the other better, that's your own personal preference, but
each one kind of kicked off with a sort of serial and chapter narration, much like you would have experienced in the 30s or 40s if you were watching a serial in the movie theater. And you have this narrator who's very bombastic and talking about what happened in the last episode.
I won't play the whole thing, but... Oh, and there's a great little moral at the beginning of each one.
Right.
Just in case you need that. So you get...
All I hear is the Hall of Justice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it does feel like the Hall of Justice, actually.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice. Yeah.
Is it true they do the opening credits in different colors depending on which characters are?
At times they did actually do them in red, for example, when there was an episode that was very Sith heavy. Yes.
There was also some that were in
Blue, yes. Mm-hmm. That's correct. So these were trying to bridge the gap between episode 2 and 3. But what's really cool about it is the way they really took a risk to do something different. They said, you know what? We're not just going to stick with Obi-Wan and Anakin and the Jedi Council. We're actually going to introduce a brand new character, Anakin's Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, which is really you talk about a dice roll, because everyone sitting back is going, well, I've seen episode 2 and 3. They're both out now because Clone Wars came out in 2008. Ahsoka is a Jedi. She's not in Revenge of the Sith. And all the Jedi got killed in Revenge of the Sith. So something's going to happen to her between now and before the show ends. And it was just a great way to really add some new tension. And as you'll find out, it also humanizes Anakin a lot, which is great.
They also did some retconning of things from episode 1. So they brought Darth Maul back because I don't know if they felt like it was a way to right some wrongs. I know a lot of people really loved Darth Maul. He was a very cool character, but he kind of died really early in the trilogy. So it sort of gives him a little bit more screen time, which is very cool. They showed all the different societies that were in the Star Wars universe, which was a really cool thing to be able to do. They had a little more time because they weren't a movie, so they could really show all these different planets with different creatures and their plights and how they interacted with the Empire. And so it really fleshed out why the Empire was evil and how they were evil. But it also showed Anakin in a different light, I feel. I feel like he's a lot more likable and relatable in this than he was in the prequel trilogy. And a lot of people sort of criticize him in the prequels by saying that he was whiny or he was annoying. And maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But I feel like he was really put in situations in those movies where almost anyone would kind of seem whiny because it's like major drama and stuff like that where he doesn't have the opportunity to kind of be a nice guy or a relatable guy, like his mom dies or his wife is dying or somebody's dying. It's like a soap opera for him the whole time he's in the movie. So he gets to do some different stuff in this.
Yeah, and one of the nice things about this show is that they do kind of get the dialogue into more of an OT, original trilogy style in some areas, especially when it comes to the way Anakin and Ahsoka interact. And so I wanted to show you a clip of that. It's really nice to see that kind of personality come out of Anakin Skywalker, who I think was much maligned in his prequel form.
Well, this is another fine mess we've gotten us into.
What? Hey, it's not my fault. You were supposed to study the holomaps.
I did! Remember when I reminded you about the giant wall and you said, don't worry, kid, we won't be anywhere near that.
Just get ready to climb.
That kind of stuff is happening all the time in this show with them, and it's really entertaining. It's nice to see.
I'll say anyone who really just has a distaste for the prequels in their mouth, Clone Wars will, if you haven't watched it, will really give you the depth and the weight of emotion and leave you with a whole different vision and view of the prequels.
Yeah.
It adds so much story behind what was lacking in the prequels.
Right.
That it's a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, the other thing that this show really brings out is the fact that the clones are no longer faceless, soldiers. They in the prequels, the films, the clones have less personality than the stormtroopers did in the original trilogy. Well, in this show, you see that they are actually unique individuals with, even though they all look the same, they have unique personalities with unique experiences. They have their own, desires, personalities, quirks, and most notably Rex and his team. They work together really well, and they have some episodes completely devoted to them with no real Jedi involvement. It's really nice to see. And then we also get a little more backstory into the development of the Force, what Yoda begins to discover. The Jedi Council begins to think he's going insane, but what he's actually hearing is Qui-Gon Jinn from beyond the grave, and then he goes on his own sort of vision quest to find out more about how to confer with Jedi across the spectrum.
I was reading an article about this show, and they were making the argument that this particular that the 3D was more for kids, whereas the 2D was more for adults. Now, I don't really get that myself. The person made some decent arguments, but this show was super violent, and people died all the time, like quite violently on the show. And just to give you an example,
I will not allow that.
What will you do? If you shoot me, you prove yourself a hypocrite to every pacifist ideal you hold dear. And you, Kenobi, you are no stranger to violence. You'd be hailed as a hero by everyone on this ship. Almost everyone. Come on then. Who will strike first and brand themselves a cold-blooded killer?
Anakin. What? You're gonna blow up the ship.
I love that part.
Anakin is extremely likable in this show. I know it's shocking to think about, but he really is. You really get behind him. We also, that violence is taken to a realistic place. You have parallels in this show directly to Private Ryan with the landing craft, such as World War II, meaning. The landing craft are under heavy flak and they're getting blown up as they try to invade Geonosis. You have angles exactly from Private Ryan with the machine gun nest, just like the auto blaster here with the Geonosian soldier, as you see clones getting mowed down. And then you also have other references. In this section of the same episode we're referring to, they reference British colonial tactics. In the top, you see a scene from The Four Feathers, where the British are using a formation called the square. And in the lower image, that's the clone landing carriers, and they're actually running out to save Obi-Wan from his downed ship. And the two clones get to the landing ship, and they say, well, the easy part's over. The hard part is getting back to the square. And they talk about having to open up the square and get everybody back in, even though it's sort of a circle, but they use the word square.
So something that's weird in this series is, or just in general, but Shakti.
Yeah, Shakti, speaking of violence, Lucasfilm can't seem to figure out how they want to kill Shakti. In the top left, she dies in a deleted scene, killed by Grievous in episode 3. And then in the top right, she's filmed again for episode 3, being killed by Anakin in what was supposed to be a hologram. And then in the middle, she's in the two-dimensional animated series, potentially being killed by Grievous. In the lower right, we have her almost about to be killed in a duel in a Force Unleashed video game. And then, of course, in the lower left, she's present in the Clone Wars. She doesn't actually die in that show. She got a reprieve. But she's like the Kenny of Star Wars. It's crazy. Yeah, the other thing about this show, it was extremely smart. The writers really knew their film history. For example, there's one episode called The Senator's Spy, where Padme has to go undercover. Anakin is told that he has to watch Padme and send her undercover to sort of fall back in love, get a guy to fall back in love with her that she knew in the past because they think he's involved in a separatist plot. Well, they're both married, of course, Anakin and Padme. He doesn't want her to do it. She doesn't want to do it, but they have to uncover this conspiracy, which is the plot of Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious with Ingrid Bergman and Cary Grant. And this shot right here, for example, is her she found a clue, and now she's trying to keep it from him, so she gives him a hug rather than holding his hand as he asks, give me your hand, and she hugs him to try and, just delay him or distract him. I want to show you the ending of this episode. The ending of this episode, we're doing a split screen. It's right out of the Hitchcock movie Notorious. The bad guy finds out that she is spying in both films. When the bad guy finds out, he starts to secretly poison her. And she figures it out, but it's almost too late. And that's when Cary Grant, and in this case Anakin, come back, and they find out that she's been poisoned. And so then this is the ending of the episode/movie.
I'm sorry, Lot. Senator Amidala is very ill, and we're taking her to her ship.
If Senator Amidala is ill, she should not be moved. Wait! Give me back my disc!
Don't worry, Clovis. It's good to know you have a heart.
Will you come in, please? I wish to talk to you.
Clovis, we need to talk.
I mean, he carries her down the stairs. The bad guys are waiting at the bottom, which in the case of Notorious are Nazis. In the case of this, it's the Separatists. I mean, it's very well done. And I was half watching this episode while I was working on something, and I suddenly looked up and I thought, oh my gosh, that's Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious.
As I think you mentioned this episode earlier, there's this great episode where there's this encounter with the origin of the Force, and there's this cosmic father and his two kids. His daughter represents the light side of the Force, and the son is the dark side of the Force. And so this is kind of this more exploration of the nature of the Force, and not really talking a lot about midichlorians, talking more about the magical component of the Force.
Yeah, and the father actually wants Anakin to take his place because he's starting to get, he knows that he's the chosen one, and Anakin doesn't do it. And he says, well, if you don't take my place, then your destiny will unfold differently. So the implication being that the events unfold that lead him to Darth Vader in part because he did not take his rightful place as the father of the Force. Oh yeah, and then another thing that's nice about this series is that Ahsoka becomes one of the central characters in a way where she becomes our eyes as to what the Jedi Council has been up to, how you should perceive the Jedi Council. She's the one starting to feel that the Jedi Council isn't making the best decisions, but she's not going dark or anything like that. She becomes the victim of the Jedi Council's hubris. She is falsely accused of murder and treason, and she has to exonerate herself because the Jedi Council eject her. They banish her from the Jedi Order, and only Anakin believes her. And speaking of movie references, there is a clip from that we want to show you from Ahsoka's flight.
You didn't even try to come and help me.
Forcing my way in would have made you look even more guilty.
I'm not guilty.
I didn't kill my wife!
I did a Peter Pan right here off of this dam, right here. What? Yeah. Boom.
I mean, their depth of movie knowledge, if you love films, you've got to watch this series. You're going to be jumping up every 4 or 5 episodes going, whoa, I can't believe they did that.
So now that brings us to the last installment, which is Rebels.
Rebels.
Clearly got some folks watching Rebels in here.
I see an Ezra right there.
So if Mal Reynolds was a former Jedi student who got away, it would have been this show. I mean, it's such an obvious Firefly homage.
Yeah, it's weird. You know, when Firefly came out in 2002, they said this is what would happen if Han Solo had a television show. And then it was, of course, made in 2002. Well, now we're in 2016, 2015, I think, when Rebels came out. And it's like Star Wars begat Firefly, which also begat Star Wars Rebels, because they've taken some influence from that. I mean, if you look at the series, every character seems to have their own distinct role on the ship. The ship is a smuggling operation that's trying to make their way in the universe. They all have a past. They're all running from the government for some reason. Ezra is this kid they picked up like River, who's got special powers, and they're trying to figure out what to do with him. And even subtleties, we don't have a picture of it, but next time you watch Rebels, look at their cargo hold on their ship. It's got a big open bay, which I know it's cargo hold, right? But it has this balcony that you access up, and then you can look down over the cargo hold on this sort of catwalk. That's Firefly. I mean, yeah, with the ramp in the back. That's Firefly.
It also sort of brought back some of the characters from the Clone Wars. So you see them sort of continue on. And that includes
Ahsoka and Rex. And the clones. They really are making this a contiguous effort. You know, Clone Wars, they had planned out, I believe, 8 or 9 seasons of that show, but when Disney acquired Star Wars, they said, you know, we're gonna kind of cauterize this, we're gonna cut this off, and we're gonna move on and do Rebels. Well, when they did that, you might have thought that, well, all the events of Clone Wars are over, but it's not true. The Clone Wars events are actually influencing the Rebels series. Well, we have a giveaway from our lovely track organizers. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming.